The Australian Ghost Whisperer with Katerina Legato and James Jennings. Hello everyone, hope you're well.
Hi everyone, welcome back.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Australian Ghost Whisperer, which is Katerina. You are the Australian Ghost Whisperer. I'm sitting next to the Australian Ghost Whisperer. I don't know why I'm saying the Australian Ghost Whisperer so much. I'm being a bit silly, I'm being delirious.
James is a bit delirious at the moment.
I am. I'm trying to lighten the mood.
Too much meditation.
Not
enough grounding.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And also maybe I'm trying to lighten it because we've got a pretty heavy topic for this week's episode. It's quite heavy indeed, which is there such a thing as soulless people who have no souls? You might say about someone you don't like, oh, they're a soulless so-and-so, but
probably more than likely they are.
Well, there you go. So that kind of answers the question, are there soulless people, Katerina? And what does being soulless actually mean?
Okay, so there are, let's start with amongst the human race, there are entities that are morphed and look like human beings, but they're not. They could be clones, or they are AI, or they are some type of a dark entity that has morphed into a human form. And then there are actual humans who have become disconnected from their soul. Now this happens over time. In the case of the human who has disconnected from their soul, reason being why, there's many reasons. You have people who are overdosing on high amounts of drugs, heavy drugs such as ice, heroin. These types of really heavy drugs will eventually disconnect a person from their soul.
Right.
Because what it does, it creates so many cracks in the energy field, and it also creates so much trauma within the energy field that the soul, the spirit, will eventually just break away. And what happens then is that an entity can step in and take over that person's body and begin to obviously guide them in very destructive ways. There are also people who are very dark in their actions, who are completely disconnected from love, from God, from nature, that are very kind of dark, suppressed. Those people often will disconnect from their souls also. Now, you've probably walked past one, or as you've seen, and they usually look completely lifeless. You can look into their eyes and there's no spark in their eyes, there's no shine in their eyes, and they have a very blank look. Their energy can feel like when you're around them, there's a presence of quite cold around them, and they have no emotion, absolutely no empathy, no compassion. Some of the worst crimes are committed by these types of soulless people. And also people somehow unconsciously make a choice also to disconnect from their soul and experience themselves as their own, like an ungodly type of being. It's a little bit like the story of the fallen angels who decided to break away from the realms of God and experience themselves as still as angels, but disconnected from the light, disconnected from the godly part of themselves. And this is how they became the fallen angels, and they came here on earth and created a great deal of havoc and led the human race, most of the human race, in the wrong direction, introduced a lot of very awful crimes, bad habits. And this goes in the beginning of time when they intertwined with the human race. And unfortunately, the fallen angels had so much power over humanity, because humanity back then saw them as gods, as, like these had come from the sky, but they were really fallen and they were dark, and they were null of any kind of love or godliness. So therefore all of their deeds and actions were all about ruling and introducing the bad habits, bad things to humanity, and led humanity astray.
That's very worrying.
Yeah.
that actually occurs.
Yeah, well, once upon a time, humanity was, in the Garden of Eden, if you like to look at it that way. And until humanity has been interfered with many times by fallen angels, some of the very dark ETs, and they've fallen under their spell, they've been misguided, and therefore this is why we are where we are today. But more and more of this is coming out now. I feel information about the history of humanity and how we've been messed with. And so therefore all of these types of dark archons and these fallen angels, some of these very dark malevolent ETs, were soulless also. They were not from the spheres of light, love, or godliness. So they have also interfered with humanity over the history of time in many ways. And to some, they're still amongst us these days, but I think we are a little bit more aware. So people are much more spiritually enlightened now and can feel and sense if there's a dark entity around them. They become much more aware of it. So they are still interfering with us to this day, but in a more hidden way than what they were more sort of, thousands, going back hundreds of thousands of years ago.
So, I mean, when people talk about souls, they traditionally talk about souls in the context of all souls are eternal. We're all eternal beings. Is that true? Is every soul eternal, or is it possible for some souls to actually perish?
Yes. So in the case of, say, somebody who has disconnected from their souls completely, but what will happen, what I've seen sometimes when someone has disconnected from their soul, that soul still kind of follows them around, a little bit like a lost soul, will follow them around. And if this person is living from a space of evil and darkness, eventually when the body dies, the soul will perish also, because it hasn't been able to fuel itself with God's light. See, the godliness within us, the spark of divinity within us, is what fuels our soul. It fuels our spirit. But when we disconnect from our own divine self and from our Creator, then the soul will perish, because it no longer has that light to draw on. It no longer has that spirit, that divinity to draw on. So it can and it will perish.
Yeah, that's interesting, because people don't, that concept of a soul actually coming to an end, it feels like, well, it's certainly not a concept that I'm overly familiar with, because like I said, people, of a spiritual nature often will be familiar with the concept of an eternal soul.
And most of the time it is. But in the cases of a person who has totally disconnected from their divinity over quite a course of time, eventually that soul will run out of energy, of fuel. Our soul fuels us just as we fuel our soul with our love and our own divinity, the light, the spark within us. When that soul is just floating around following a person, because they will follow that person around until such time as the body dies, then that soul has not had any nourishment. It's like it's been starved of its fuel, that is the light and love of God, or our Creator. then it will just perish. It's like something that just kind of dies.
When you talk about like dark entities and evil beings and what have you, one thing that I'm curious about is it possible that those entities at some point in their existence were actually light beings and they've sort of transmuted into darkness through, I guess, choices or things that they've done, or are things born into darkness? Or I'm just trying to get a sense of, like, do you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand. So again, there's the fallen angels who decide to separate from God, just like certain humans who become soulless have decided, perhaps at an unconscious level, to separate themselves from the godliness within them. Okay, then there are other realities, other dimensions that live from a space that exists from a space of absolute darkness, where there is no emotion, there is no love. They are not godly in any way. They are not part of God's creation, but are part of the darkness, that are part of they have acquired this darkness through artificial intelligence, through the realms that they exist within, which are the lower realms, the hellish realms, and they feast off the suffering of other dimensions, of other realities. They feast. This is their fuel. This is how they continue to exist, and they're always looking to connect and destroy anything that is from the light, anything that is from God. So that's how these dark, hellish realms exist. They are much lower realities beneath us, but they can come into our reality and create havoc amongst people. You often see like a bunch of people, say, in a fight, and they start screaming and yelling at each other, and over time they start, as the moments pass, they get angrier and angrier, and this fuel, this energy that the person is emitting as they are getting angrier, draws in these dark entities. So they're like, oh wow, here's our feast. And then they inflame and really fuel the fight. And the next thing, they could be starting to hit each other or pull a knife out at each other. This is an example of how they will fuel an argument. And this is how they can interfere. They feed off human emotions, the negative human emotions.
Right.
That is like louche for them.
Right. It's very disturbing. Very
Just
disturbing.
like we feel good when we're around people who are positive and full of love, when we're with our loved ones, we're with family members, and you feel the love and you're having this beautiful day together. So is the opposite, where you get a bunch of people that are perhaps, fighting with each other, or really heavy drug taking, where they have destroyed their energy field, they've destroyed their chakras, they've completely have no love for themselves, they've disconnected from themselves. I'm not saying they're bad people by any means, because I know these things can happen to innocent people because of whatever they've been through in their lives. After a while, then these entities will come in and continue to encourage them to live a destructive path. And I say this because I've had, over the years of doing this work, people who have tried to, obviously gone into clinics to come off drugs, to come off alcohol, alcoholics, gambling and things like that. and they come out and they want to make that change, but they still feel like they say to me, there's like this demon that keeps telling me to go have that drink, go have that drug, go gamble. And it's an actual entity that they have invited in unknowingly through their bad habits. And although they've detoxed and everything else, that demon's still with them. Because I've cleared this shit from people. And then it's like they're able to reconnect in to their spirit, reconnect into their soul. You can reconnect to it again. It doesn't have to be over forever. You can heal and you can reconnect people to their spirits and to their souls once again. And eventually they're really able to heal and move forward. So it doesn't mean that it is a completely hopeless situation. But in the event that they don't do anything and they just keep spiraling down, then there is this, unfortunately, event where they can completely disconnect from their soul and never be able to reconnect with it again.
Yeah, wow. That's really quite worrying. It sounds like there is like a genuine, it sounds kind of dramatic, but like it sounds like there's like a genuine like battle for souls here on Earth. It's kind of like there are dark entities that want to snuff them out.
Because the soul holds the spark, the spirit. It encases the spirit that is the aspect of God. So once you destroy the soul, you're then able to turn off the spark of light that is within the spirit. And then you're able to disconnect them completely. And once they're able to achieve that, they are able to take control of a person's body.
Right. Okay. Okay. This might be the wrong kind of question because, I think it's wrong to sort of view God as this outside force that needs to swoop in and save us.
No, it's a force within us.
Yeah, because it's a force within us. So
we are part of that God force. Yeah.
So when we talk about like, well, why doesn't God swoop in and stop this from happening? It's up to us because the spark of God's in us to actually battle these things out and fight them ourselves. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
And if you call on God for help, it doesn't mean that God won't help you. God will help you and maybe guide you to the right person and to the help that you need. It's not like God has never forsaken you. It's mostly a person who has made, an unconscious or conscious decision to forsake God and to disconnect from the spark of divinity that is within them. And this is where obviously this person will run into all kinds of problems. But again, if they're ready to purify and they're ready to work through their issues, then it can be repaired and it can be resolved.
I've definitely met people in life where there just seems like there's nothing going on behind the eyes. Like it's you can actually sense it. It's like there's a dullness or
sometimes they're not really human. They're just not.
Right.
They are just morph into human form, but they are some form of an entity that, living amongst humanity for their own selfish purposes.
Right. So some of them actually do want to manifest to live amongst us and cause more havoc or...
Cause more havoc. Some of them are very sexually depraved. Therefore, they want to, obviously connect to women, and a lot of them are males, and they seek out that depraved sexual expression that is loveless, or they're they're committing some of the most hideous crimes that we've possibly ever heard of, that are just unimaginable horror. You can just sense, I mean, God forbid you'd ever want to run into these, but they are completely devoid of emotion, of empathy, of compassion, of human emotion, where we're able to feel love. They are unable to feel anything.
And it feels like in modern society as well, people who are devoid of emotion and empathy, it almost feels like they're given a free pass to run rampant because there's nothing really to stop them. And in some cases, those people actually are rewarded for that behavior, especially in, like, say, business, because if you're a ruthless person who's devoid of empathy and you don't really have any feelings, you're probably going to make the kind of like cutthroat business decisions that are going to get you ahead and make you, a financially successful person.
Yeah, that person is perhaps more devoid of compassion and the spark of God within them, and is just here for selfish purposes. Service to self.
Right.
And doesn't care who gets in the way as long as they get what they want and need. And it's often, it's greed. It's something that, they have this insatiable hunger for more and more and more of whatever it is they feel they need to sustain them. Because they're so empty, they're always looking for external stimulation to kind of energize them, to fuel them. Yeah, because when you're empty and devoid of love, you're just this empty shell. So you don't have it within you to sustain yourself. You're always looking to take from another person. So whether it's through a loveless sexual act, whether it is through just, taking other people's life force, having control over people, or over a partner, where you're just wanting to take that person's life force so that you can feel as though you're fueling yourself. They're always on the lookout. They're always on the lookout for what it is they can take from another, because they don't feel, they don't have it within themselves.
I spoke to you a bit about this earlier, just on the topic of people who are like devoid of empathy and narcissists and whatever. But I'm reading a book at the moment called Sand Talk. The author's name, I apologise, it escapes me right now. But if you Google Sand Talk, you'll find the book. Really great book, and written by an Indigenous author. And he talks about how in Indigenous culture, there used to be checks for people who would be these empathy-free narcissistic types. It's like, within the tribes, there would kind of like be swift, harsh punishment for behaviour, and it kind of kept that rampant narcissism in check because there was a way to balance it out. And then he talks about how in modern society, because there's no checks and balances for this kind of thing, that like narcissism is just like, it's just rampant. It's everywhere, because he said, he's like, there's no one to check this behavior. There's no punishment. And as I said, in many ways, people are rewarded for their shitty behavior. And so, he talks a lot about how things are way out of balance now because of that. And it's true. If you look at society, like I said, these kinds of people not only are, allowed to flourish, often they are rewarded for their terrible behaviour. So
it may seem as though they're being rewarded, but they're not, because they are not going to go to a very nice place once they leave this incarnation.
Yeah.
They will often be reunited with these dark realms, that hellish realms that I've spoken about. And I've seen souls, lost souls that have that really horrible narcissistic evil people, and they have been absorbed, swallowed up by darkness, where I've gone into a home to cross them over, and they've just completely been absorbed by darkness. So they haven't gone into any of God's realms, that's for sure. So they continue to spiral in this darkness until somehow they have it in them to bring themselves out of it. Yeah.
So even crossing over to the other side is not enough of
well,
a
they're
wake-up
not
call.
going to vibrate to light. If you've disconnected to love light in your physical life, when you die, you're not going to automatically be given a ticket to go back to the light, because you've disconnected from it. So your whole frequency is so low that you're going to go to your own frequency match, which will be those lower hellish realms where you will feel eternally lost. And, if you've ever watched that movie, What Dreams May Come.
Oh, with Robin Williams?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where when he's trying to find his wife and he's walking through those hellish realms where those people don't even know where they are or who they are. I've seen those realms, obviously, psychically, and that's what it's like. It's like they don't recognize themselves anymore. So it is like that.
That sounds
So
awful.
even though they may look as though, these people look as though they're getting away with it, or that they're just, destroying so many other people's lives, they're not really getting away with it, because you wouldn't want to be where they're going to end up. What we do here on this earth matters, and if we're not living a life of, of compassion, love, and then obviously there's not going to be love waiting for you when you die.
Yeah. And I've thought exactly that when I've encountered people like that, where I kind of think, you've got no idea what's waiting for you. Like, I mean, these people typically do not think that there is an afterlife at all.
Well, they don't think, they're too self-absorbed.
Yeah.
And they often don't believe
Yeah.
in an afterlife. A lot of them just think, well, when I'm dead, I'm dead.
Yeah, I think that helps people like that get through life, because it almost feels like an excuse for materialism. It's like, oh, well, there is no spirit life, so it's okay to only give a shit about making money, buying expensive cars, getting a
But
big
they're
house.
looking for external. There's nothing wrong with having money.
Yeah, of course not.
No,
Of course
that's
not, no.
because there's a lot of
That's not-
wealthy
yeah.
people out there that are
Yeah,
beautiful.
that's-
But it doesn't
of
mean
course.
that they are always looking for external stimulation.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Because they have nothing within them.
Yes,
yes.
That's what I meant. Like, there are people who there's nothing they can give their inner life.
And even once they've acquired, say, this, 100 new cars or billions of, they're still going to feel empty because it hasn't come from within. And it's going to give them an initial thrill, and then that's it. There's still going to be the insatiable hunger to look for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
But when we're talking about these soulless people, or people who are severely disconnected from their souls, we did touch upon this, but like, they do have a chance to turn it around.
Oh, absolutely. You always have a chance to turn it around. Yes, you do. You can, reconnect to your soul. You can reconnect to your spirit and begin to heal the wounds. Yeah, absolutely. But some people just don't and decide not to. And there's people who make an absolute physical, conscious decision to disconnect from the spark of God within them.
Yeah.
And so that's when they begin to disconnect from the God aspect of themselves, and then be pretty much guided and led by the dark entities and archons that will, come in and connect with them.
Yeah, take advantage of them.
Yeah. And continue to misguide them. And, these people often will very much be living through their egos, let's say, completely through their egos and service to self.
Yep. Yep, plenty of those people about, unfortunately. But anyway, you know what? I think that's probably all the time for this week's episode, Katerina, unless you've got anything else you'd like to add to the topic before we go.
I just want to say, like, we're talking about the most extreme. I mean, please don't think we're, if you have a terrible boss it doesn't mean that they're all, godless and soulless. We're talking about extreme cases here, and that they are, that they are here to bring in the darkness, to keep the darkness here, to make sure that they can misguide people and humanity and the vulnerable in these terrible ways. But it doesn't mean that you have to accept them, and you can recognize it as if you're meditating, if you most people would recognize and sense and feel.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you again for your insight, Katerina.
You're very welcome, James. So, a bit of a heavy subject.
Heavy.
People often ask and want to know about the dark realms, and, like I said, we can override these dark realms by just being in our true state, in our godly state, in a space of love and connected to our hearts, and this is how we override the darkness.
There you go. Okay. All right. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we appreciate you checking us out, and we look forward to seeing you again next week with another new episode.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody. Have an awesome week.
Yeah. Thanks, Kat. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
To gain access to private spiritual development classes, guided meditations, and live Q&As with Katerina, please visit www.patreon.com. That's patreon.com/The Australian Ghost Whisperer.